Welcome to a Trekzone Conversation, the podcast where we dive into science fiction. And today, real-world spaceflight. Chris Boshuizen is here to discuss his recent spaceflight on Blue Origin. Chris, thanks for beaming in.
Hey, Matt. Great to be here.
This is a Trekzone Conversation.
And don't forget, Trekzone membership available via the join button under each video on YouTube or via the trek.zone/support. Plus, Trekzone's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and your favorite podcast feed. Find us, like, follow, and subscribe. Chris, what drew you to flying on Blue Origin's second flight just a couple of weeks ago?
Well, I've always been a space guy, and I've always wanted to go to space. So I've been working on it for my entire life, and trying to make that happen.
Very, very cool. Well, were there any nerves specifically being the second flight of Blue Origin?
Yeah, I've worked in the space industry almost 20 years. I've launched nearly 50 rockets in my career, which has been really fun, by the way. But 5 of those have blown up, believe it or not, and so that's like 10% when you think 10%. About it. I'm like, okay. Yeah, so it's a little bit like I knew a little too much going into this, so I was definitely nervous, and there were some hard conversations with my girlfriend Vanessa about, hey, this is someone I want to do, but just, full disclosure here, it's a rocket.
Exactly right. Well, as you say, you've launched 50 rockets. Tell us a little bit about your background, yourself, and what you do mainly.
So I grew up in Australia. I was born in Sydney, but I actually grew up in the countryside in Tumbarumba, which is like rural New South Wales. And I always wanted to go to space. I don't know where I got that from, but it's always been part of me. And so when I was 17, I went and applied to ADFA to be a test pilot. I thought, I'll go to officers school, join the Air Force, fly planes, get transferred to NASA, become a NASA astronaut, go up to the space station. So I got to Kapooka Army Base in Wagga and had to do all the admissions tests. And I found out I was colorblind, and probably just barely colorblind enough that I might have been able to fake it if I'd known. And not that you would want me flying the plane, when they say push the green button, Chris, and I'm like, I pushed the red one, But anyway, I got disqualified, so I had to find another path to get to space. So I've been working, had some really amazing opportunities in my career, but I've worked at NASA, and I've built satellites, and I've launched rockets, and really done a lot of fun things along the way, and really been involved in the space industry in a way I wouldn't have if I'd been a pilot. So yeah, space it's been a really big part of my life, and I've done some pretty cool stuff.
It is certainly an incredible one, and one that Dr. Andy Thomas had a bit of success in the 90s with NASA, being an astronaut himself. For us Australians, it's a little bit trickier to get into space at the moment. Our space industry is sort of focusing on logistics and getting satellites and stuff, not necessarily people at this point. Interesting to learn that you're colorblind as well. And accessibility of space is becoming a bit of a thing where those sort of things aren't necessarily an obstruction anymore. I guess it's certainly one to look forward to in the future. With your flight, do you hope to do it again someday?
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of like going on the best roller coaster at an amusement park, and you come down and you're like, okay, I'm getting back in that line. I'm going back right up, going right up.
Well, there was one special guest on your flight, Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, of course. What was the experience like with him? And are you disappointed all of the attention was given to him a little bit?
No, it's great. I got announced, and I mean, I got all the love in Australia, to be honest. And I feel like Australia was I just feel really flattered by and honored to that's people were playing my live stream of my launch in schools around Australia, and I'm just grateful that I could have such a massive impact on other Aussie kids. So I think that was cool. But what was great about having William Shatner on the flight was it reached the rest of the world as well. As an Australian, I was always going to get news in Australia, I think, but to have our story, that space is opening up, to have that story spread around the world, I think William Shatner was a fantastic ambassador for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what was your biggest takeaway from spending those minutes above the Kármán line?
So there's this thing called the overview effect, which I think William Shatner got a really bad case of, or a good case of. Like it hit him hard, and you hear him. I mean, you can see the video of him coming down, and talking about his experience, and he was moved to tears by it. And that's really interesting to see how someone who, didn't really know anything about the space industry, how they react. Frankly, even though he's done movies, they're all on a green screen. We have to remember that, right? And so he hasn't thought about space itself for real until he went up there. And he was frankly the most representative example of an ordinary guy. And he was deeply moved by it. And I think that really, speaks volumes about what it would be like when we start to get every other human being up to space and have a look at our home from the outside.
Was it worth it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Fantastic. Well, what's your opinion? Just to ground it a little bit here, there is opinion and some commentary around about these flights being a waste of time and money, a little bit like billionaires with nothing better to do with their cash. Yeah, I mean, what's your opinion on that? Do you think that it is or it isn't?
Well, I'm not distracted by who's paying for this, right? I mean, I think it's possibly one of the beneficial failure modes of capitalism that billionaires are doing this. Because if it was left to governments, we'd still be doing tiny, discrete things here and there, visiting the space station, sending a probe or two to Mars, and regular people would not be getting involved. So I'm okay that that one of the failure modes of capitalism is that billionaires spend their money on interesting things. But that's always been the case, right? I mean, private enterprise funded a lot of the exploration of the Earth 400 years ago. So, there's also, there were bad parts of that as well, like colonialism, which is still a problem all around the world. But it created the modern world that we have today. And so I think, yeah, it's okay. And for me, going to space is part of that exploration tradition that we as humans have always had.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I agree with you. I think that it is the way forward, especially for us. We're certainly filling up planet Earth. And some say we need to spread our plague elsewhere in the solar system. I like to think on the positive and say that we need to get out there and explore things. So, a really interesting take. And definitely, as you say, I mean, probably would still be flying shuttles for 7 astronauts heading to a space station if it wasn't for private enterprise. And the race between billionaires as well, certainly an interesting one. Well, Chris, I really appreciate your time today and am incredibly jealous of the experience you've had. Thanks for beaming in for this edition of A Trek Zone
No,
Conversation.
no worries. Thanks for having me, Matt.